There are way more than three things on our mind about the Ohio State Buckeyes, but it's Thursday. The rule is we can only do three. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Berm, how are we feeling? You ready to get into some three things Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to do? It's a beautiful, beautiful week of contemplation. And I think that overall, everyone should be coming down from this past weekend's misery, right? Like we're moving forward. We're feeling better.
Better. I don't know. We're moving forward. Everyone has no choice but to do that. And that's a great way to get into thing number one. What is something, Berm, that Ohio State, you already said Will Howard this week. You did name one positive, so you can't do this one again. What is one thing that could have come out of Saturday night that Ohio State could feel good about? Optimistic, a little positivity.
I'm trying to be objective when I say this, okay? Because I realize that people are going to look at the injury to Joshua Simmons and be like, that is catastrophic for Ohio State. That is the worst possible guy to get hurt. And all those things can be true. But I do think it wasn't perfect by any means, but the way Zen Michalski played and the fact that he didn't walk into that game and give up 4 sacks and didn't commit 4 penalties and do all the things that you could have done in that environment, I think has to be a positive for a kid that people have been waiting to see what's the depth at tackle really like. And, you know, it's kind of a weird catch-22 because you want to say, what's the depth look like? But then you say, I hope we never have to see the depth. So you see it. I know that there will still be growing pains for Zen Michalski or whoever the starting left tackle is moving forward. But I actually felt like pretty good about the fact that they were able to get into that. I mean, the drive that Josh Simmons went out on, Ohio State went 70 yards and scored. So it's like there are positives there from the offensive line. You know, and we've talked through the last few months about Justin Fry and the job he's done and the addition of guys like Tim Drevno and what it's meant to have Tim Drevno and Mike Soleni and Justin Fry and Chip Kelly all working together on the offensive line. And I feel like there should be some positivity about the way that room is going. Again, we'll certainly see some things that will make you shake your head in the next few weeks. I don't think that there's much debate about the fact that Josh Simmons was the best offensive lineman on this team heading into the Oregon game. Certainly, that's not to say that the other guys can't step up and make plays because Zen Michalski had an opportunity in fall camp to do that. Obviously, Austin Sareveld moved around quite a bit. If he ends up being the guy, I just feel in general, I'm trying to be positive, and I feel like the offensive line, even losing Josh Simmons, is in a better spot right now than we would have thought heading into the season.
Yeah, first you have to give credit to Zen Michalski for that because he stepped into the most hostile situation that he possibly could have in a key situation on the road against a number 3 opponent, a really good one. I was like surprised. I had a number of conversations on Wednesday with Bill Landis about like, am I missing something with the PFF grades? What's going on with the pressure rates, Sports Info Solutions, all these things that they're saying like Zen Michalski didn't play great statistically by their metrics. And I didn't feel that way in real time. I didn't even feel like, yes, that he might have lost more one-on-one reps and Will Howard helped escape in some situations on Saturday night. Like maybe I felt in real time, but I still thought it was overall a very solid performance. And I said like, why is that? Because the PFF grades for Donovan Jackson like continue to be flawless. And I don't mean this to, I want to stick with the positive theme, but I think where we landed was like that PFF doesn't really understand where to assign pressure. They don't always know where it's coming from or who's giving it up because the disparity between the pass blocking between Zen Michalski and Donovan Jackson was like 60 points. And I'm like, I don't think that's how that can possibly be true because they only even gave Zen Michalski credit for 2 pressures allowed, which if that continues, I think Ohio State would probably be fine with that. I bet they'll be able to scheme up and protect well enough to make enough plays. And, you know, I'm not on high alert for Ohio State's offensive line to completely fall apart in a way that in a lot of other years, because of the depth that you mentioned, Berm, like maybe I would have been.
Yeah, I brought up 2016 earlier this week, and I'll bring it up again at some point, I'm sure. But Isaiah Prince was the starting left tackle on that team in 2016 and gave up 40 pressures on the season. Ohio State gave up 6 sacks to Penn State, 8 sacks to Michigan that year. They lost the Penn State game and beat Michigan despite giving up 8 sacks. So you don't have to have a flawless offensive line to win big games. But I am encouraged. Again, we've seen Zen in the last year really sort of change physically. He looks like a much different person. And I can't help but think he's going to have some real confidence coming out of that game, knowing the absolute hornet's nest he walked into and feeling like, hey, I handled it pretty well, all things considered. So to me, that's a positive. And, as you said, like it would be surprising if the offensive line just collapsed from here. I have a tough time seeing that happening.
I did some digging, and I felt this on Saturday night, and I'm glad to get some reinforcement elsewhere. I actually thought defensively that the linebackers played pretty well, Berm. Like when you're looking for something to grab on to feel good about for the Silver Bullets in a game where they gave up 32 points, and we have talked all week about the defensive line and the breakdowns in coverage. In between that, I thought they were pretty good. Were they perfect? No, but especially Cody Simon and Sonny Styles, the grade that they got against the run, those are the two highest on the team. And we've in the middle of September, we're saying, oh gosh, what's going on with the transition for Sonny Styles from safety to linebacker? And he's missing tackles, and there's all sorts of open space in the middle of the field. I think once they've narrowed down the responsibilities, and Sonny Styles hasn't had to play Mike, Will, Sam 1 week, he's got the lightning bolt on his head. 1 week he doesn't. Once they've allowed him to settle into a position, I think the last 2 weeks have been really encouraging for him. Cody Simon, he goes into that spot where you know what you're going to get from him, and he's pretty reliable on a week in, week out basis. They had 3 missed tackles in that game. Not going to be perfect on every single snap. And maybe that's too many. Maybe James Laurinaitis won't accept that from them moving forward, but they made 15 tackles. And that was a game. Maybe some of the other issues that we've talked about put them in spots to miss tackles that they wouldn't have otherwise. I don't know. I feel like I came out of that game thinking linebackers in a good spot heading into the second half of the season. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how I feel.
I think it's in a better spot at this top than we thought 3 weeks ago, but probably in a worse spot overall, because I don't know that the depth is stepping. And we saw a really good, encouraging first month of the season from Marvelree. Clearly that is not translated to October yet. He did not play particularly well against Michigan State and did not play almost at all against Oregon with only 4 snaps. So I think that maybe there's some question marks there. I think what's interesting is that Oregon is the first time this year where we've seen Ohio State really just let those linebackers focus on stopping the run and playing the middle of the field, not really worrying about traveling with tight ends, et cetera. We saw that more with Jordan Hancock, with Caleb Downs, with Lathan Ransom. Oregon is the first team that they've played all year that is going to require those safeties to maybe cover the tight ends. But you're going to see that against Nebraska because that's their best passing options are at tight end. And you're going to see that against Penn State, whose best receiving option is their tight end. So I think that it sets up nicely for the next couple of weeks for Ohio State to begin to feel some more confidence in what Sonny and Cody Simon are doing. But I'd really love to see Marvelree get back on the horse to head in the right direction, because with a player like him, with the athleticism he has and all of the conversation in the offseason was like, hey, is he going to understand the big picture of the defense? And he seemed to be on that track. And now, like I said, the last 2 weeks maybe have felt a little different. You hope that it doesn't mess with his confidence at all and that he's able to get in there and make some plays, because eventually you're going to need more than 2 linebackers who you can count on and trust. And I'm not sure if that's the case right now after the last couple of games. So we'll see if that, he played fairly well against Iowa. Don't get me wrong. It was the Michigan State game and the Oregon game, which we knew those are the offenses that are going to do a lot of the motion, the eye candy, the stuff that we've talked about. So it'll be interesting to see how that translates to Nebraska and Penn State, who also do a lot of motion and a lot of attempts at just confusing you. Although they don't do anything like crazy schematically, once the play is happening, they do a lot of it pre-snap, and that can be confusing.
Yeah, that'll be important. It's also why it's so important to have really savvy veterans in that defense. They're going to have to adjust, no doubt about that, during the end of this off week and heading into next week before Nebraska. But thing number 2, Berm, is something you don't think that we have talked about enough this week. That can be good or bad, although we did just start with good. So if it's bad, I understand, but something that you just don't think we've talked about enough.
Man. I mean, I feel like there's so many things that are being beaten to a
I
pulp.
know. That's why I want to spruce it up a little bit.
And again, I'm trying to stay positive here. I don't think enough people are talking about how different the offense is than we anticipated it would have been when the season started, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously, we knew Emeka Egbuka was going to be really good if he's back and healthy. We thought maybe having that the surprise, I say surprise somewhat lightly, but the surprise addition of Jeremiah Smith and what he's been able to do for Emeka. Because I mean, he's still a true freshman. I don't think people expected him to be outside of like the person on this side of our conversation right now. Like, I don't know that anybody else thought he would be like the best receiver in America. But I think he might be. And I think that Emeka Egbuka has been so reliable and been such a security blanket for Will Howard that if you would have told me at the start of the season this Ohio State offense was going to be pass first and run second, I could not have believed it. And yes, they lost the game at Oregon, but I feel so much better about where this like the first 5 games of the season, I think I was convinced in my head that like, well, you're playing Marshall, you're playing Akron, you're playing Western Michigan. You can pass against those teams all day long. Seeing Will Howard in that environment, seeing Will Howard against those defensive backs and against that front four that Oregon has, and seeing the accuracy, seeing the decision making, I just feel so. I mean, I already talked about it on Wednesday, but like I feel so much better and so much more confident that Ohio State not only has a guy that can win you the Big Ten, but also win you a national championship. And I know people aren't going to be trying to find reasons to be optimistic this week because you want to feel like the sky is falling every time Ohio State loses a game, but there are so many opportunities to still go out and achieve all your goals this year that I don't think that it's fair to anyone to focus on all of the bad feelings coming off this game. And I guess if there's a second thing I think people aren't talking about enough, it's just the NFLification of college football. Like we have got to change the way we think about a loss in college football. And I think back to 2021, the Bengals were 10-6 or 9-7. Don't care. They were a play away from winning the Super Bowl. Like every game that you lose sucks. But if you are still where you need to be at the end of the year, that's what matters. And I think that people are so caught up in every minute, every second of the Ohio State football season that it's hard to look past the front of your nose sometimes and say, okay, well, fix this and move forward. And maybe it's because people don't have confidence that the coaches can fix it. I mean, if that's your take, that's fine. I don't find myself in that camp. That's just because I'm such a naturally cheery and optimistic person.
That's right.
But
those are really famously our roles on this show.
Yeah, I think you have to be able to look past the loss and say, okay, that sucked. Take a deep breath, move forward, because the season is far, far, far from over.
You're absolutely right, partner. And I think that I knew that this was going to be the case. And I said last week on this very show, when you said maybe they could lose the game and it'll be fine because you have to adjust to an NFL mindset. And I spent the entire offseason saying that. And I talked myself.
It's so hard to do, though.
Yeah. And I said, I think I might have a harder time with that this week than you, which is a real topsy-turvy flip-flop of the normal rule of things. And I still think because of the way that Ohio State approached this season themselves with their goals and the fact that winning a Big Ten is so critically important to Ryan Day and to the captains of this team and the veterans who came back, like there is a greater sense of urgency and a deeper sense of concern than I know should exist, because there's such a logjam now. It's maybe I said it on Wednesday, like maybe this becomes a more clear cut. They actually have control of the Big Ten race in a month's time when everybody else loses and plays each other. But like right now, it's such a jumbled mess, and you're in the post loss fog of war that we've dealt with before with Ohio State and losing to Michigan. That it's like, it's not that I doubt that they can get out of it, because I still very much think that they are going to get to Indianapolis. But I think the NFLification part. I can't fully embrace it this particular week, and maybe next Thursday I'll be in a better shape to do so. But like, it's just that the same problems are popping up. Like I feel bad for the Ohio State fans that and people in the Woody who are dealing with these losses that all have the same hallmarks of other games that we've covered over the last 3 years. And maybe that's why it feels to me like, tougher to see the path forward, because I genuinely don't know if some of these things are going to be changed in a week's time. And they're very highly compensated and very highly accomplished coaches. They have more talent at their disposal than any other program in the country.
Yeah,
like deep down, I know that they can do it, but there's just the part of my brain that's like, why are we talking about the exact same things happening 4 years in a row? That's like, I really want to stop that.
Yeah, and you should want to stop it. And like I said, if there's a portion of the fan base that says, hey, I don't trust that this staff can fix it because of what you just said. This has happened. This is a repeat feeling. Then fine, and I'm going to respect that opinion and say, hey, you may be right. I don't know. There's a fundamental difference here, though, in that in the last couple of seasons, whenever these losses have occurred, it has then been a year until another meaningful game was played for Ohio State, right? Like there's a meaningful game to be played next week. So the ability to get past it and move on is not just present and in your face, it is required. Like there is no ability to sit here and lament the Oregon loss for much longer than today. Like you have got to move on. If you're Ohio State, you have got to turn on the tape of Nebraska and watch what they do. You have got to be at home this Saturday watching, all this great football going on, but your ass better be watching Nebraska and Indiana, because those are two teams you play in the next 4 weeks. So how do you figure out, how do you get better? Like it sucks, and losing anytime sucks. These are highly, highly competitive people. And certainly there are issues that Ryan Day has to address and fix. And I don't know that they're going to be able to be fixed during the season. Some of them you can put a Band-Aid over. Some of them are going to be putting a Band-Aid over them almost by themselves, because you're not playing Oregon right now. Again, next week, you're not playing. But in this world we live in, had Ohio State won that game 34-32 on Saturday night because they made a field goal, and then played Oregon again in 7 weeks in Indianapolis and lost, what difference is there? If they come back and is that better? Is that better than Ohio State learning from it and beating them in 7 weeks? I don't think so. I know that the loss stings for people. And again, I do not pretend that I'm not an Ohio State fan. Like when Ohio State loses a football game, it not only affects like our jobs, like us professionally. Like I'm someone who growing up, if Ohio State lost a football game, it affected me for weeks and months and years at a time. Like this is not an impersonal thing for me. What it is though is an understanding that we have got to change the way we view the football season. And Ohio State losing a game to a number 3 team on the road in the second week of October means virtually nothing. And like, yeah, it's gonna expose some potentially some soft spots in the Ohio State defense, and maybe it gives you things to work on that you didn't think you had to work on. But in the big picture of the sport and in the big picture of life, like it means nothing. Like so now it's pack your shit up and move on. Like that's the way it goes. Like you can't like cry about it anymore. If you're an Ohio State fan, if you're an Ohio State football player, like it means nothing. It's time to bow your back and get back to work. Like you're the most talented team in the country, or you believe it. If you don't believe that, then you should probably pack your shit up and leave the locker room, because you don't belong on the program.
Too much profanity on the show this week.
But if you're not doing that, if you believe that you can't recover from here, then leave the program. That's essentially the way I would couch it. Like you cry about it or don't. I mean, it sucks to lose, but it means nothing, because you have 5-6 games ahead of you to right the ship and make sure that when you play Oregon again, you're ready for them, because that's the rivalry that is now like going to take over the Big Ten for the next decade. So you better prepare yourself.
Okay. Thing number 2.
Sorry about the S words.
Yeah. Make sure that those are bleeped out. We don't want to lose our license to broadcast on YouTube or podcast.
No one ever cusses on YouTube. That's true.
Thing number 3 was something that you were annoyed by, and I think you probably already got a lot of that off your chest. So I'll start, and maybe I'll think of a different thing number 3 for you, which is that Ohio State losses seem to come with this really delightful surprise at the end, which is, hey, the rules are going to change because we saw something affect Ohio State in a negative way, or that they could do nothing about to fix. And the NCAA saying, oh my gosh, the rules are written so that defenses should not be able to get an advantage. And Dan Lanning just put an extra guy out there to stop it. We got to fix that immediately. And then there's nothing you can do, but Ohio State has to just sit there and take it. Like the rules of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, they're changing. Oh, you're in for this year and you're out for that year. The review process that happened in the Fiesta Bowl. It's so crazy to me that the Buckeyes have built this program that is so good on almost a week in, week out, year in, year out basis that anytime they lose, it takes almost like unnatural circumstances and an act of officiating or something that you've never seen before. And then you're like, sorry, Ohio State fans, you're going to have to take that one on the chin. And Dan Lanning is a freaking genius. Like, good for him. Like, I guess he is, but why in real time could the officials not be like, you know what? The rule book says you're not supposed to gain an advantage with a defensive penalty. Like, can't we just put the time on? Like, it took 2 seconds for the NCAA to look at that rule and be like, oh yeah, that's what you're supposed to do anyway. Like, that sucks. That's insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst part of that is the reaction, because it what you're saying is 100% true. Like, it does almost require an act of God for Ohio State to lose a game at this point. When they do, it's shocking. It's system shocking. But if the response then from the rest of college football, which is, oh, Ohio State lost, poor them, we need to change the rules. Like, that's Michigan won a game a couple weeks ago because of a Big Ten officiating screw up against Minnesota. And initially, or almost immediately, the Big Ten came out and said, okay, we're going to change the way that's enforced because that's not right. So it's just not an Ohio State thing. But it's indicative of a program that there are so many eyes on every single thing that happens at Ohio State that, like, when you see something that's egregious and an egregious violation of the spirit of the game, which is cheating to committing a foul on purpose, like to gain an advantage, is how can that be a positive for your defense? How can your defense possibly benefit from that? Like, it seems insane that would ever be allowed. But, you know, kudos to Dan Lanning and his staff for paying attention and knowing the rules. And I think I mentioned it to you after the game. I think that the Giants did the same thing to the Patriots in the Super Bowl a handful of years ago. Like, it's something that's been out there. And unfortunately, it takes weird things to happen for people to notice that, hey, this is a rule. So it's dumb, but, you know, I'm glad for Dan Lanning's sake that he had it up his sleeve. You know, that's, you know, it's a cool talking point this week. But, like, again, ultimately, it means little. You know, I do think it might be telling about, you know, that there's a coaching staff paying attention to these little things, and maybe the Ohio State coaching staff is not. I don't know. But it shouldn't be allowed. I mean, like, it shouldn't be allowed. So I'm glad they're changing it. It stinks that the impetus is an Ohio State loss to do it. But, like, you know, the simple truth is we don't know if that extra 4 seconds would have won Ohio State the game or not. We know they would have got a field goal attempt. But whatever, you know, yeah. It's over now. That loophole is gone. So
it's just, like, hard to comprehend how it existed in the first place, because, like, purposefully using 12 players or more, which, is I mentioned earlier in the week with Bobby on Monday at Roosters, like, I saw Tennessee use 13. Now that was in a goal to go situation, so there couldn't have been 15 yards marked off, but there would have been at that point. And they've changed the rule at some point where, like, intentionally committing a substitution foul is a personal foul and 15 yards. And then the clock would have been irrelevant in that point. If that had been the way that it was applied, Ohio State would have immediately kicked the field goal and the game would have been over. So,
yeah, well, I mean, it goes to the same thing. I mean, there's other rules, and we talked about it at Roosters, but the fact that the pass interference penalty on Jeremiah Smith is a 15-yard penalty is insane. Like, it's insane.
But
make it an 8. If it's inside of 15 yards, it should be a spot foul. Make it a spot foul. If it's 8 yards, you would have gained. Make it an 8-yard loss. Or just a standard 5 yards for offensive pass interference inside of 15 yards. Like you can't. How do you give a 15-yard penalty for something that you would not have gained 15 yards on? Like I don't understand that. I get if especially
sometimes you can commit a holding call.
Foul, it's different. If it's a personal foul, it's different. Like I understand, but for a pass interference or just a basic penalty, I don't know how you can give 15 yards. I don't know why holding is 10 yards. I see quarterbacks get sacked and holding get called on the play. Like, oh, didn't do a very good job. Like who cares?
That's what I mean. I don't know why an offensive pass interference penalty is more severe than a holding call. That doesn't make any sense. But at least my point is we can be very annoyed about bad calls, bad officiating, but at least those are the rules that everyone accepted going in. Everyone else in the world, except for apparently Dan Lanning, was like, well, you know what? We shouldn't be purposefully illegally substituting players to try and win a game and affect the clock. And you're right. You have to give him credit for knowing that loophole existed and taking advantage of it. Like, I'm not trying to take that away from him, but I just don't even understand how no one else even was thinking that's what I should do in this situation. Like, because it's against the entire spirit of playing the game of football.
Well, he comes from the SEC. That's pretty much what they're built for.
That's true. That game where I saw 13 guys on the field was in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Before it just means more. The old SEC adage was, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So like that was.
Well, that still is the adage. They just shortened it to it means more.
Yeah, it's a euphemism.
Yeah. Is there anything else that's annoying you? Because that's thing number 3.
No, I mean, look, I think we've said it enough this week, but like it's time to support your Ohio State football team. If you're watching the show because you love Ohio State, it's time to shed the frustration of the last week and move forward. If you're watching a show because you hate watch, that's cool. Then you can say we're crybabies or say we're whiners or say whatever, say Ohio State sucks, fine. But if you're an Ohio State fan and you're still sitting on Twitter or on social media on any platform on Thursday, 5 days after the Ohio State game, where everything is still on the table for this team this season, and you're saying that a coach should be fired, or like then you're not really sane.
Well, if someone is hate watching us and they have made it nearly 28 minutes into the podcast daily,
if they are, then kudos. We love you. I mean, I don't.
No, I think that a hate watch for that long a time, that does sound crazy to me.
I believe it was Confucius, I think, who said, if you don't have haters, you ain't popping. Could be wrong. It might not have been Confucius, but could have been Plato. I'm not sure.
It was Socrates.
Oh, that's right. Soccer moms, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Soccer moms have said that a lot. So yeah, I mean, whatever. It's get it all out. Go in, find the coldest, darkest, most soundproof room in your house this morning. Go in there, scream as loud as you can, punch pillows, do whatever you want, but get it out of your system, because next Saturday, Ohio State at noon is going to be playing in a top 25 game against Nebraska, and they need a loud crowd to go in there and support the Buckeyes. So if you're not willing to do that, then I'm not sure you're actually rooting for the program for the right reason. So you can be mad. If you want coaches fired, let's get to the end of the season and see what happens. And then make that decision.
Okay. Those are 3 things. It is Thursday. It's the podcast daily. Just getting it all out. Cleanse. There's still a Freaky Friday to go, but it's not going to be that freaky. They're not even going to be bold predictions. It's going to be super serious and straightforward. We know that's what you want. So there is going to be maybe a little bit more negativity before we fully turn the page. Just a forewarning on that one, because maybe the Friday podcast daily has already been recorded.
It's totally fair to be critical. Let's be clear that there's nothing wrong with being critical and expecting your highly paid, coaches, highly paid players, highly paid administrators to put out a program that wins a lot of games and competes for national championship. But those things are happening already. Yeah. So, but we can demand answers and expect good play and be critical while not losing our minds and being completely insane. That's all. There's got to be a balance in there somewhere.
That sounds right. We're going to try and find it still. Every day is a journey of self-discovery. And we appreciate you taking that step with us on a Thursday 3 Things edition of the Podcast Daily. He's Berm. I'm Austin. See you later.